Hello, interwebs, and welcome to the 5th episode of Conspiracy Synergy. I'm your host, T. Snyder, and as always, thank you for tuning in and for taking the time to delve into relevant controversy and real-world conspiracy. Not theory, real conspiracy, which can loosely be defined as people getting together and making secret plans. That's it. That's all conspiracy is. Not theory, secret plans. Like a football huddle, that's a conspiracy. A surprise party, that's a conspiracy. And when conspiracies do happen, it's important for us to understand those secret plans. Otherwise, we're in for quite a shock later on. Anywho, as we've established in previous episodes of this show, there is a successful, meticulously documented, on the record and verifiably real global conspiracy now totally out in the open that has been going on for 100 fucking years straight. I'm not even kidding. This is what's actually going on right now. And those of us who have been studying this for a few decades and are more than a little kind of like tired of these criminal enterprises are kind of annoyed by the fact that the world is being destroyed and that the public has been tricked to cheering it on. So on today's episode, we're... I got the COVID. Man, I got it twice. Does that mean that I'm vaccinated? I think so. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Sneeze on your shoulder and it's all good. That's how we vaccinate people. All right. Immune system. It's working. You know how I know? Because I'm not dead. All right. Cool. Moving on with the show here. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. I got like snot in my beard. Oh, man. I can vaccinate you with my beard now. You know? Don't got to go with Big Pharma no more. You got me, you know? Okay, anyway. I'm gonna go back to the show. So on today's episode, we're going to begin our venture into the rabbit hole in order to save the world from these psychopathic a-holes. And if that all sounds a little too utterly ridiculous, cartoonish, and absurd to possibly be true, allow me to clarify something. Like, it's cool. It's cool. That reaction makes perfect sense. Because you are correct. It is completely crazy. Like, I'm a fiction writer. If I wrote this bullshit, I'd be embarrassed, honestly. Like, it is so stupid. What's actually going on and how it actually works. And that it works. Oh my God. But it does. You know? Reality is stranger than fiction. So to escape from this matrix of corporate douchebaggery hell-bent on ruling the world by manipulating what we believe, we, the interwebs, are gamifying revolution in order to encourage people to wake up and save the day. What does that mean? Gamifying revolution? Well, we're turning the really messed up situation we're all in right now, as a species, into a game so that everyone can level up and understand how to save the day. Collectively, we will go from level to level and endeavor to defeat the elite. Free our minds, plant seeds for the future, reach for the stars, high-five a unicorn, you know, all of that good shit. We're going to do it, interwebs. We're going to save the world. And we're going to do it together, step by step, learning the hidden secrets of humanity along the way. Diving right in, population control is the art of turning human beings into human resources, harnessing our power as people by using the philosophy of cybernetics to turn all of us into cogs in larger machines. To better understand this concept of controlling large groups of people effectively without them even realizing it, let's take a brief glimpse back in time to explore some tried and true methods of controlling the masses. In ancient Rome, the Colosseum served many different purposes. It was free for all to attend, viewers were segregated by seat, and placed closer to the action based on their class and society. So rich people were closer to the blood of the slaves who were dying on their behalf. You know, bread was available in the cheap seats, and the many different spectacles contained inside that oval were unrivaled. And yet, what was happening inside of that arena, that was all a distraction. So then what was the point of the Colosseum? If the gladiators and the games were a distraction, what purpose did a ruse that elaborate ultimately serve? Bread and circus and informal census. It was more about controlling and monitoring the crowd than it was about entertaining them. Those in attendance, or those who were conspicuously absent, told you everything you needed to know about the city on every different level of society. You see, the arena was a way of putting the audience on display. It allows the people who rule society to observe us, to keep us in our place in society, which is very different than how it's spelled out on the marquee. Now, looking at another slice of history for insights into how people can be subtly tricked into seeing the world narrowly, let's take a brief look-see at the history of piracy. First of all, no. Conspiracy and piracy, they don't have the same etymology. Piracy is derived from the Greek pirates, which loosely means to attack, whereby conspiracy stems from Latin conspirare, which loosely means plot. So if you have a conspiracy of piracy, you have a plot to attack via covert means. It isn't as simple as what's seen out openly. Different flags were flown by pirates to create the illusion of being friendly, while lying in wait under the deck is a very different and unseemly story. The technique of flying false flags, claiming to be one of the good guys when really you were a bad guy in disguise, is a classic, timeless tactic of war and deception. And just like the art of war said, all war is based on deception. And yet, how we all think things in the world around us, of our view of how things work and what they're ultimately there to do, that largely depends on the superficial labels we observe. The flags that brands fly and institutions swear by, announcing their purpose unto us, their brand, their identity. You know, the way the public sees them and what they're allegedly doing for the public. One purpose is advertised, while any other purposes, those are kept hidden behind false superficial labels. The real irony of the history of piracy is that most pirates that we all think of in the way that we do because of how books and movies portrayed them, well, most pirates were actually former members of a navy. One review of Anglo pirates revealed that 98% of them were previously members of the Navy. And while that wasn't true for everybody, there was an interesting back and forth dynamic between state powers and those who wanted to plunder under their own banners. So a lot of the time, pirates were in the Navy, and then they said, fuck that shit, and they went out to sea. You know, they go pirate and rob indiscriminately, only to be hunted down, washed aground, or integrated back into the Navy at the state's decree. But even then, you know, it wasn't all that simple, because there was an intermediary bracket of pirate called privateers. Privateers were basically just pirates hired by countries to pirate or hunt other pirates under the decree of a country so that countries could have a monopoly of piracy. So really it was all the same bullshit, just flying by different flags to get away with it. You know, like everyone basically just using flags to murder or rob from each other for one reason or another. I mean, hell, if we're going to talk about population control and superficial labels that can be used to justify oppressing other people, just look at the East India Trading Company, the once upon a time most powerful corporation ever who had a monopoly over the slave trade. Also, literally started 2 wars by forcing China to buy their opium. You know, I mean, pirates wouldn't be able to pull off that level of bullshit. You know, it takes a corporation and countries to be that brazenly criminal. Does that mean that the states and corporations are just bureaucracies of pirates hiding behind false flags? And doesn't that mean that so many of the flags we all fly by or swear by are just distractions from hidden schemes? So what about in the modern day and age? In the modern day and age, what do people see when they try to think of the idea of conspiracy? Because in the same way that false flags, rampant criminality, drug wars, and bread and circus were tactics used to influence and control us in the past, what sort of distracted magician games are at play today? Well, unfortunately, in the modern day and age, just about all that we see has been defined for our minds by the TV. The Colosseum seats dictating our class and society here today. It's our couch. The public has not been taught to understand that entertainment is also entrainment. Hollywood and the media is not how they appear on the surface. They're also there to train us to view the world in a limited, formulaic, propagandized, redundant, emotionally stunted, and very narrow way. It's called predictive programming, as mentioned previously. To illustrate this, as an on-the-record part of the globalist agenda going back 100 years of successfully manipulating the world, let's briefly return to the ninja insights of Carroll Quigley, as taken from the Anglo-American establishment. According to Quigley, this engineered formation of social control built without the public seeing it for what it really was, the grand design to engulf the entire world in a matrix of public ignorance, that formula was created in the form of a triple-point plan. What was that? It was the grand architectural design of controlling the entire world's view of reality. Seriously, like 3 starting points were established from which the Round Table and their ilk would be able to consume public opinion. Education, media, and politics overlap all 3, and it became possible to control the entire world's view of reality. It was a covert way for the elite of the day to make sure that their say was final. Whatever we saw on TV or read in the news came to define our worldviews. That's what the hidden purpose of mainstream news and the entertainment industry collectively merges to form. Meanwhile, in the Tavistock Institute, they were able to help devise yet further schemes to cover everyone's eyes, rigidly crafting and shaping our very opinions in the philosophical realm themselves in all directions at once. And the public at large, they had no idea what was really going on. So that's pretty creepy, A well-established, successful secret society hijacking all of our views of reality, using well-established tactics of social control, psychological manipulation, made all the more powerful by modern technology and shill celebrities. Wow, I mean, that's pretty bad already. I wonder if the whole population control, rule the world thingy gets, a lot worse still, Oh, man, it's so bad. It's really bad. You did. Oh, man. The timeout. The most difficult thing to do to explain the situation is to get people to understand the direction they need to be looking at. Because we all think the level of corruption is down here. And we're like, oh, that's the level of corruption. No. It's up there, It's way up there. And so it's really difficult to get people to wrap their heads around something if they're looking at the ground when really that level of corruption is all around, So that's the level we need to be viewing this thing on. Anyway, because of that, recently, laws have been changed to make it legal to use propaganda against the civilian population. Even worse than what was already happening behind the scenes before. And in other parts of the world, we're seeing the military victimize its own citizens to run psychological war games. At the same time, big tech, which itself originates from deep state, has been utilized as a way of controlling public opinion, manipulating every narrative about anything. And even a former head of the CIA, William J. Casey, has been quoted saying, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the U.S. public believes is false." So that's pretty conspicuously targeting the population now, isn't it? Like we're not just being monitored anymore. We're being targeted. This is bigger than just control because as history evolved, control became more and more total. And now, with technology closing in all around us, it's almost like we're inside of the matrix, you know? Only we don't realize it because it's not digital. It's built out of our opinions of stuff. A carefully crafted matrix of public ignorance designed to blind our very ability to perceive reality. This is what Chomsky was om-nom-nomskying when he belched out the concept of manufacturing consent, the various means and methods by which the media can trick people into thinking inside of the box. Like bricks in the wall, these many screens that have depicted our view of reality have collectively built subtle parameters inside our own minds that constrain our brains, and by doing so, create a portable prison for everyone's thoughts. Vis-a-vis brainwashing. Studies show that television shifts our conscious attention in a way that makes us more receptive to suggestion. Our brain waves literally alter to become more sleep-like, and we're put in a state closer to hypnosis. Classical conditioning, reward structures, groupthink conformity, the tendency to obey a perceived authority, and a variety of other social incentives factor into how we behave as well. People are a herd species. We are. We find strength in numbers, and we intuitively gravitate towards large followings, which makes sense. Like people fare better in groups, so it's really important to be a part of a strong and healthy tribe. So, not only do we gravitate towards the largest herds, we also have a hardwired tendency to conform our behavior to be in line with what we've heard from within those herds. And where does everybody hear most of what we've all heard? From the mainstream perspective in all of its multifaceted and various different manifestations. Now, the real power of TV and mass media, it isn't just what it shows us, but how often we see the same thing over and over again. The cardinal rule of advertising is that most people need to see something 7 or more times before they'll buy it or so much as notice it. And according to a trained CIA interrogator, what is brainwashing on its most simple and basic level? What is it? It's nothing but repetition. That's all brainwashing is on its most basic level. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And dictators and tyrants throughout all of human history have known this and integrated these styles of public manipulation into the propaganda that they churn out in mass. And if you really stop and think about that for a second, of repetition and tradition being brainwashing, wow. It poses the question of how much repetition is too much repetition? And what happens when the repetition gets so bad that we're simply no longer allowed to be different? We're no longer allowed to be free, to dissent, to contradict, to speak out, or to disagree. Because repeating something often enough is only really saying one thing. It's only allowing one thing to be heard by the herd. That's the power of repetition. It teaches us to obey whatever we hear the media say. They aren't our thoughts. They're the thoughts that were suggested to us so much that we thought them. Okay, hold on. Gotta play devil's advocate here because all right. I can believe that a lot of people have been fooled or are just kind of, like unaware of stuff, and that a lot of things are really corrupt, or maybe some bad apples, and, things just don't work quite right. Sure, fine, whatever. But there are still good, hardworking, loyal, and loving people out there fighting the good fight. In fact, most people are inclined to love and help each other more than they are to try and hurt each other. So as much as these very powerful forces of manipulation are very much at play, surely, at the end of the day, most people aren't that evil. And you're right. No, they're not. People rock. Most people do not want to participate in pure evil, which is why it's so very, very important to keep good people from understanding how these various components all add up. If we saw the system for what it really was, there's no way people would tolerate this bullshit anymore. You know? Because if you really think about it, corruption is kind of like plumbing. It's everywhere. But we don't see it directly. Instead, shit flows through the walls and under the floors without most people becoming aware. And if you add to this metaphor of rank corruption the very structure of the establishment itself, the problem gets even worse. Now, you all know those various like triangle thingies that I repeatedly use to illustrate various companies, institutions, and conspiracies. I use the same exact shape of triangle to illustrate all of those various different institutions for a very particular reason. They're all the exact same blueprint of organization that all of society has been constructed inside of. The fancy word for how these evil triangle motherfuckers are structured is called a centralized bureaucracy with a compartmentalized and layered hierarchy. What the fuck do all those big words mean? It means if you keep people separated, they don't understand what's really going on. By layering people by their perceived importance and keeping them compartmentalized in their individual disciplines or tasks, large numbers of people can sit right next to each other all day long without having any idea what's really going on. People exist in every job by following the orders of the people at the very top. And because of the raw power of hidden channels of corruption combined with different levels of initiation combined with high levels of compartmentalization, it all adds up in a way where you can technically trick good, warm-hearted people into doing just about anything. Think of it this way. If you're enough of a Nazi, as in you do not see what's going on, then you can unknowingly be tricked into behaving like a literal fucking Nazi. And this way of structuring people, that's the conspiracy at the heart of how we've all been arranged not to see this super sinister, this like sinister formation of literal fucking Nazis. It doesn't just form our political views. It forms our very understanding of what is possible in reality. And that is ultimately the purpose of the machine on its most sinister level. To define our very perception of what is possible. Not just what is real, but like what is possible to be real. Ever. It's like they're brainwashing us moving into the future until the TV says that something exists, and then we're able to recognize it as truth. The analogy of Plato's cave is that shadows on a wall are viewed as if that's what's really going on. Except it's just an elaborate distortion. It's not reality. It's a depiction of reality chained in a way in which that's all people are able to see. The same class of people who have purchased government and education as a part of their triple point plan starting 100 fucking years ago, they have been systematically turning up the heat of their propaganda campaigns so that they can create the world that they want in the future, using us as their indoctrinated slaves or distracted cattle so that we don't get inclined to meddle. That is the map of the system in which we're trapped. So how do we escape from thinking inside the box? How do we escape from the matrix that surrounds us? Well now, interwebs, I'm glad you asked. For us to break free, we need enter the rabbit hole.